There's a dumb movie that I think stars Bob Hope or somebody from that crowd that I guess Paul McCartney is friends with, which is about a guy who fakes a whiplash. And he has these detectives who try to trick him every which way into revealing that he actually is faking. And this was the underlying idea of how Ringo Starr and the others who advocated for drug advocates around John Lennon played their storyline about, for Louis Laughing and so on. And I had to mingle with the public school system. They were saying that I wasn't, man enough to go to Vietnam and admit that I wanted to imitate John Lennon and use heroin or something. And if I didn't pass muster for the hardcore people, that I didn't deserve Ringo's graces. Because in their view, I had been implicated in what they claim is death. And it's a very simple thing for them to pull off. As a reality check, I had a single mother who was at work all the time. I was in the elevator with Steve Hackett at the Hilton Hotel. I asked him, why didn't they play some of his songs? I personally liked The Hermit. And he said, well, he seemed to be irritated by the question because maybe it had come up. He said that we discussed it, but we decided that there's not time for it or something along those lines. It wasn't an interview. I was just curious. And he may remember that. I mean, the Hilton lobby was a place where groupies could sometimes brush elbows with somebody who was starved, but interesting. I saw Michael Rutherford when he came to the Syrian mosque. He stood and chatted with the fans for a minute outside. I thought that he was a very big he's about 8 or 9 feet away from me. Impressive character. And I liked Taylor's Heart when I heard it live. Phil Collins evidently sang more for me at that concert, Syrian Mosque maybe even, than I missed, which is troubling. I was at the Syrian Mosque with Cheech and Chong when I realized I was deaf. I was really very, very young, and it was horrifying to me that I was going to face a life death because I couldn't understand the jokes. I took my sister, and they couldn't understand anything they said. Maybe that's what the Obama supporters at CCAC meant by the joke's on you. I went to their CIA safe house in Pittsburgh. I don't know. There's people who listen to this music and hung out at Heads Together with Nick Brack, who sold me Killers, Angels, and Refugees, which I read dutifully. I thought Peter Hamill was a pretty good writer, right? got past a half a stick of marijuana, just a little roach, but Meg said it was the best reefer she'd ever smoked, so I tried the puff that was left of it. It was pretty good. Her boyfriend wouldn't let her come to Roxy Music with me, which is really too bad. I could have used a chaperone like Megan. She you know, I'm trying to rescue my eyes from this Parkinson's disaster. I'm getting a lot of spasms and stuff. Because whatever switchboard they masterminded, it's really destroyed me and it refuses to stop sabotaging my recovery. I don't know where they get the ridiculous read of what happened. They apparently had a blueprint for how they wanted me to be seen. And something I did, announced my own agency. And so they got into an argument about what was really me, what they were impinging on my persona and saying was me, or what I testified to. And it was like people see what the Trump machine is doing, can look at a picture of me before I was attacked. Hear my story, my horrible story of being poisoned and tortured and kidnapped and gassed and beaten and kicked in the head and subjected to slaughtering head blows, and even witnessed the neuroplasm that was implanted by an Attica State Prison psychiatrist, and shrug and say, what of it? You know, John Lennon was better than you. And it's just played into this compulsion to side with the people who kidnapped and tortured me. I find it strange that someone like with the presumed politics of Peter Gabriel would be siding with the ICE figures in Minneapolis. At least they have badges. People who kidnapped me had hard cars, but they had very revealing names. Pitman is like Hitman, Pit of Hell, Pitt, Pittsburgh, Quarryman, Pitbull. That's what kind of murderers they were or are. It's shocking to me that they were going on to the point of torturing a deaf man. I don't mean to recriminate, you know. I used to listen to their music was all. I liked it. I thought things like For Absent Friends presaged more for me. I listened to Fool's Mate. I didn't consciously imitate any of them, but I tried to struggle with the mindset of Peter Sinfield a little bit too much. My mother got upset about it and told me to knock it off. She liked the title Cadence Cascade. As I was telling somebody today, I didn't imagine. I went to Bob Fripp's clubhouse and saw that, I knew he was friends with Peter Gabriel. So I thought that he had enlisted Peter in sneaking me a song, because I know how Pittsburghers are. You had to be pretty careful about it. Caused a lot of trouble, but he did sneak me a song or something. I didn't put together. Deaf people were ignored, They talk and talk with their hands and nobody knows, they just ignore them. And you get used to being isolated and ignored. I didn't imagine, like if you look at the League of Crafty Guitarists, you imagine Yoko Ono bothering about them? No. I even less imagine that she would be bothering about me, much less wrapping me up in some freak out. I can't take myself out of their disturbing Jerry Falwell style peep show when they ran roughshod all over me for several years and then put me in this prison. But they were obviously working with Trump. I mean, it's, like when you see a Native American getting arrested or a woman of Latino origin who's pregnant getting beaten on the streets, or hear the stories about the shootings, for God's sakes. You don't say those people were having fun unless you're wrapped up with Donald Trump. You don't say they were having fun. That's why they were beaten up. They were picked on and horribly set upon. That's the reality of it. I don't understand how anybody can forge what they said in the way they said, and forge what they said about it's I mean, you have to name Paul McCartney, at least you no choice. But the gang like weaponized news, I don't agree with them about rounding up illegals, as he calls them. It's just a misdemeanor. But at least you can say that they don't want to steal the assets of these people. They want to pursue a good neighbor policy, send the Venezuelans back to Venezuela and let the Venezuelans keep the oil. Have a competent compensation plan to the people of Venezuela as shareholders of what they have. I mean, it's not that hypocritical. They're very concerned about what's going on. They don't like the tactics. That's not what they have in mind. They just want people to tend to themselves honestly and appropriately, it seems to me. And since we're dealing with some fairly respectable type artistic voices of awareness in adulthood, you would think that when they see pictures of me in shock and trauma, I mean, I have a friend associated with the VA in Seattle who saw the picture I'm thinking of and said that's very disturbing. I mean, he has no particular reason to falsify, which would be any different than anybody else from the VA. And yet I mean, the person who got me in trouble by refusing to admit he was becoming my friend and that I should be given the benefit of the doubt as a friend who he knew, looked at it and said he couldn't see what it revealed. I mean, that's dishonest. You can see perfectly clearly that I'm disfigured with trauma. And the picture before that, then I'm a soft-spoken, fair-haired little boy. But somehow they got it into their heads that they could sell me as a curiosity made prisoner, an exhibition, an atrocity exhibition, I think is how Joy Division put it. I used to play Theme 1 on my saxophone, Starless on my saxophone, If There's Something on my saxophone, 3 and 9 on my saxophone. I used to play them just about every day. It's practice. And when Blue, I said, I wanted to audition for King Crimson, I was just manning up to my ambition, my secret. And he said, "What would you play?" And I said, "Piano." And he said, "Fripp doesn't like piano. He thinks it's a timbre instrument." I mean, he played with tip, but I'm not that intelligent to see where I would fit in with them. Lyricist, maybe, or something I was thinking. Stage presence. But no, I mean, I knew that was not going to happen. It wasn't like I was a Unabomber stalking them. I just, I mean, an adult might have said, "Where did this secret dream come from? Where did it take root?" And I could have probably attributed it to the depth of feeling I got from In the Wake of Poseidon, the careful accounting that I admired so much from the young person's God, from the high standard of poetry in the Night Watch, from the energy. And maybe if someone had examined me closely enough, I might have been able to find that there was a gang called the Gutter Snipes who made being in awe of King Crimson mandatory to their good auspices. And it's hard to know what these fellas already knew. I didn't get along with Ballou. Bill Bruford seemed to be sort of Fripp busting about it. Look, I know Fripp. I know how you got, you know, intoxicated with his generosity. Just get over it. Tony Levin, I didn't have anything. He's playing with all kinds of people. I mean, I should have walked away when I realized that Blue wasn't my friend. I was still curious about what was going on. I mean, Gabriel was a lot more of a friend to me. And the stuff that came along with the baggage that came along with the high school stuff. It's just Pittsburgh being creepy. How it got gnarled up in that storyline from Israel, particularly the way it did, speaks to my darkest concerns of complicity. In fact, the evidence I found has forced me to consider that John Lennon was in on it. I mean, that's where I arrived when I looked at everything long enough and hard enough. So John Lennon was pulling a dupe, is what that would mean. And the people who helped him were duped. And they're like right here, you can't reason with them. And this is, the way that the Russian tag team with the CIA, because, Oswald was in Russia. The whole script idea is from the non-aggression pact side of the fence. If you don't know what that is, look it up. Is to say, let's see you talk your way out of it. Why should we respect civil norms? And they invent things, they draw lines because you put your head up. Abdul Eisenstadt used to say, if you can't bark with the big dogs, stay on the porch. It's a ludicrous thing to say to somebody at the University of Pittsburgh who went through the Pittsburgh public schools, is deaf and is just editorializing. I'm not saying that my editorial points of view didn't have merits. We wasted a lot of money under Reagan on things that were established to be self-defeating. Somehow the idea that indulging hardcores over deaf poets and the way that I got sissy balled by Pittsburgh had such a fixation over people's heads that it intrudes on their reality. Because when you see the people who tortured me, you're looking at hardcore killers. And why would I can understand there's a administration that wants to scare everybody into obedience, but it's hard pressed to find where that mentality is in evidence in Peter Gabriel. If somebody had told me, if you approach Robert Fripp, Peter Sinfield is going to get mad and tell Mick Jagger, and Mick Jagger's going to send dogs after you, I would have believed that to be possible. There's somebody who had said to me, if you go to Peter Gabriel with the truth about how you were tortured as a child, he will talk to Donald Trump and they will laugh at you with a haughty. I would not have believed that was possible. That may be what happened, but I would not have believed it was possible because I respected them. So that all of this stuff about a creepy dude making a nuisance of himself to King Crimson, which was the established balderdash that Ballou had worked out with Carnegie Mellon University and Bush, Zappa and Bush, doesn't hold up. All I was doing was being mindful of the fact that I loved their talent and it had affected me. And somebody said I have a way with words. Well, what it is I had dislocated status. And I could see that I knew things and believed in conscientious principles that other people should share. For example, I read the Nuremberg trials when I was in my teens. That wasn't an assignment because I was deaf. I wasn't going to school very much. I was scared a lot of the time, but I would get very absorbed in reading. I read the whole, from Their Finest Hour to Triumph and Tragedy, the whole thing by Winston Churchill, page by page, cover to cover. That's how I found out about General Foucher. I didn't even know knew Martha Johan, who I read absorbedly. I was absorbed by these things. The first book I read cover to cover was about old Britain. Admittedly, I was a child and was not a dreamer of being a fighting man. What I believed was that the tragedy of war had been very real and that we needed to snap out of our caustic thirst for it. And the King Crimson had a song called Peace. Peter Gabriel had a song about Biko. I mean, there were things that you could throw your nickel and dime into the hat about with these guys. So I didn't shy off. But I'm used to being told that I'm awkward, that my reputation is affected by my deafness. I mean, people who I hung out with would hit me with that constantly. Jeannie took offense at it finally, extricated me, gave me an order to minimize association. And she taught me sign language, and I ended up going back to college and succeeding and getting accredited as an honors student. And in a way, you know, when you look at Fred's marvelous, marvelous writing to me, I mean, it was really a diamond. I gave it back to them. I gave it back to Ballou because I didn't want it to cause trouble. It was because I'd given him a discipline insignia that I had made in a fine arts jewelry studio in Philadelphia. I hitchhiked from Pittsburgh to St. Louis just to hear him play. And I made the tape with the tape loop system that I rigged up about Dover Beach, which I loved. I mean, I can recite to you. It's by Matthew Arnold. It's a Victorian poem. The sea is calm tonight. The tide is full. The moon lies fair upon the straits. On the French coast, the light gleams and is gone. The cliffs of England stand, glimmering and vast, out in the tranquil bay. Come to the window. Sweet is the night air. Only from the long line of spray, where the ebb meets the moon-blanched land, listen. You can hear the grating roar of pebbles which the waves suck back and fling. At their return, up the high strand, begin and cease, and then again begin, with tremulous cadence slow, and bring the eternal note of sadness in. Sophocles long ago heard it on the Aegean, and it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. We find also in this sound a thought, hearing it by this distant northern sea. The sea of faith was once too, at the full and round their shore, lay like the folds of a bright girdle, furled. But now I only hear its melancholy long withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind down vast edges drear and naked shingles of the world. Ah, love, let us be true to one another. For the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy, nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. We are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms, struggling flight, where ignorant armies clash by night. And the Anarchy Club of Alderdice did, um, you know, swinger sister things. Tremulous cadence in the background at their return, up the high strand. It was a tape loop system, you know. It's not like it, not everybody was stayed up till 2 in the morning to hear Frippertronic dynamics of disaster. So I mean, it was a goofball way to get the honors status that I felt dislocated from under the circumstances of not knowing sign language, but having self respect.